Has carving bricks in foam ever made you want to put your fist through a brick wall? Maybe this can help. Okay. I'm going to start out with a smaller piece of foam core. This is some remnant that I had from a previous project. This piece in particular is about 10.5 inches by 11 inches. The size doesn't really matter too much because we're going to make a billet and we're going to square that billet up. And then we will use that billet to quickly create rows of bricks, which we can then fasten to the sides of our buildings or whatever other surfaces you want to use. So first thing, I'm going to square this off. It looks pretty square, and I could just go with it, but I want to make sure that I'm running as square as possible. So I'm going to go from this corner for all my edges. I'm going to cut with a good angle, nice and firm, steady. Okay, so you have to decide upon how thick you want it to be. There's nothing right or wrong. You can eyeball it, or you can measure it. I'm just going to eyeball, based on my cutting mat here, approximately 2 inches. I'll get that squared up again, my straight edge, and I'll cut again. I'm going to continue to cut these 2-inch strips until I've ran out of material, and then I'm going to create my billet. I'm going to go ahead and lock this up, get it nice and straight on one edge, and then we're going to run some hot glue across this back side. That's why it doesn't matter if it's really straight on this other end. I'll get the hot glue there, and that'll keep this nice and straight and flush, and then we'll work off this edge. Okay, I like to make sure that I have a nice squared edge at each end of this. We squared the faces, but now I want to make sure that I have a good squared edge. So I'm going to use the Dollar Tree blade right now, and usually you want to make it a nice dragging cut, and you can see that I'm having trouble keeping that straight. Not very straight, but it's good enough for this project. Now this end is quite a bit less even. I'm going to use the Olfa knife on this one. Again, I'm squaring to the face and cutting with a dragging motion. You notice that the blade didn't bend under the pressure of cutting through 5 layers of this, and the straightness of the cut was only impacted by my own control, which I did decent this time. Next step that I like to do is to mark all of my bricks. You have to decide on a size that you're going to use and just be consistent. It really doesn't matter what the size you use is, as long as you stay consistent throughout. So, and I'm going to cut just a little bit more off of this so that I am right at a 1/2 inch mark. Okay, so I've got 10.5 inches to work with. And I I think I am going to go with simple half-inch marks. So every half inch, I'm going to make a quick little mark here. This is probably the most tedious part of the whole process, is lining up and measuring. Next step, I'm going to use a lighter straight edge for this now, especially since I'm not cutting. I'm going to take the straight edge and I'm going to draw these lines all the way back. I've found that I like to have the depth of the bricks be 1/2 of the width. So I used 1/2 inch spacing here. So for my depth, I'm going to use 1/4 inch. And that was 1/10 of an inch. It helps if you actually pay attention to what you're doing. Okay, let's go with right here. Okay. Now, with the understanding that the hot glued side is sacrificial and is going to be wasted material, I went ahead and made that last mark. So now I'll play connect the dots with the ones that I did correctly. I'm going to draw my lines here. Okay, now we're ready to start doing our separating and cutting, but there's 2 different ways to do the bricks. One of them is untextured, and that would just be making our lines to show where the bricks end and then cutting along the strip. Another option is to texturize the front face. If we texturize the front face, this can help improve the appearance of weathering and reduce the amount of uniformity to show that these are either natural, handmade, or rough-made. One of the most popular methods of texturing foam, whether it be foam core or expanded or extruded polystyrene, is a rolled up ball of tinfoil. I like a different way better, but you take the rolled up ball and you roll it around the edges. You can also make a simple rolling pin out of tinfoil just by rolling some up. We'll get some decent results as well. Now, lighting may make this difficult to see, but when you start painting, especially when you start dry brushing your painting, all of this texture is really going to come out very nicely. So compared to the smoothest side, normal texture with the tinfoil, and then my preferred way is this texturing rolling pin that I made. Simple 7/8 inch wood dowel, completely smothered in wood glue, and then packed with sand of different coarseness. This gives me quite a variety of texture, and it's lasted over a year. This, I can just roll right along as heavily or as lightly as I need to give quite consistent distressing and texture. And it's a lot easier than tinfoil, and it doesn't wear out anywhere near as fast. All of that texture comes out amazing when you start to paint and dry brush. So, at this point, we're ready to go ahead and start making our grooves. You have a lot of different options for doing this. One option is the knife. Keep it as square as possible. You can either make a small incision. Make sure you do not go more than about halfway as deep as what your next line is, because that's the depth of your bricks. Unless you want to glue on thousands of individual bricks, don't go that deep. So, there's one way. And if you do use the knife, either before or after, you take a ballpoint pen. Run it both directions 1 or 2 times, and that will help give you a very nice groove. Another way is just to use the ballpoint pen, but it has a tendency of ripping small chunks out. I don't like that method very much at all. Some people use a wooden pencil. Don't quite have as much ripping, but it does rip. Some people use a mechanical pencil. Again, it can rip. Another option, at the Dollar Tree, you can get manicure files. Small emery boards, get I think about a dozen for $1. Take these, try to be as square as possible. Give it a couple sawing motions. This gives a nice groove. You can again follow it up with the ballpoint pen being dragged to round off the edges. And there we have it. We have the faces of many, many bricks ready to separate. At this point, I'll clear away the remainder of my tools here. Take my metal straight edge. Line it up with that first line that I made. Blade fully extended. I will make vertically the straightest cut that I can. As accurately as I can. At this point, I have a row of bricks. And I'm ready to move on to the next. Doing this by hand, you'll notice where my hand slipped and I did not have a good hold of my straight edge. That's something to avoid, but you can always clean it up just that little bit before you get started on your next row. Again, doing this with hand tools works, but it is a lot more work than if you use a hot wire table. Now, to show how these are going to come together and make an actual brick pattern, I'm going to take one of these and I'm going to take my 1/2-inch brick and I'm going to cut off 1/4 inch off of one end. And that will let me take these and show you how these are going to stagger. So now you can see that I have a staggered brick pattern. So if I take the rest of these, or at least two more of them, and I cut them down to only 1/4 of an inch, I'll quite quickly be able to build up a full face of bricks. Now I have a couple choices. I could build these up by themselves, or I can do this directly on the surface of whatever I am making the bricks on. Getting these strips is the first step. When I glue them together, I like to do it on what I am gluing them to, so that way I can use a thin layer of glue between the strips, and that will give the appearance of mortar between bricks. So the bricks aren't stacked completely perfectly right on top of each other. Now, if you have to go around a corner, it's actually quite easy. You break off one of those 1/4 inch pieces, and now on the other side, that 1/4 inch piece from around a corner has now become the first. I ended up, after some cutting, with 35 strands or rows of bricks. And these are 10 inches long. So I've got 350 inches of 3/16 inch tall bricks. Add in a little bit of a layer of glue. I'll get 1/4 inch out of each of these. This is enough to do a small building. Now, before I get on to the application of the bricks, I'm going to show you how easy it is and how fast you can do these with a hot wire cutter and a rip fence. I'm going to set that about middle of the row since I'm only doing single width sheets right now. I have one complete large sheet of foam core that I'm going to rip down to smaller sizes and get it going into a billet. And because I've set my rip fence, I don't have to make individual measurements. I can do this very quickly. Nice clean cut, but it was slower than I wanted. So I'll just turn up the heat a little bit. You will not be disappointed with the Proxon. So I have 7 nice, long, 20-inch pieces. I'm going to break these down into a 10-inch piece. There we have it. I have a billet 14 high. This is going to be perfect for what I need. I'll take care of this edge in just a minute. Okay, and because I knew that the Proxxon would work so fast, I've also got my glue gun fired up and ready. And ready to go on this big, thick billet. The thickness of your billet is dependent on what your hot wire cutter can handle. I know that the Proxxon, I can cut up to 4 inches without any problems. I've gone a little bit higher, but the the arm is a little bit more than 5 inches tall. So I have small billets. I have some moderate sized billets. I have longer billets, which it's about the size of this one I'm making right now. So I can keep some billets around and be able to do different things with them rather quickly when needed. Okay. We have one nice healthy billet. Now, although the Proxxon will cut through hot glue, it can get a little bit smelly, and it adds a new type of fume that you have to be aware of. So I try not to cut through hot glue or PVA glue any more than I need to. I try to stick with just whatever's necessary to cut with it. Crank this up nice and hot. I'm now going through, 14 layers. I have a nice square edge on this billet, and I think I'm going to go ahead and get the other side squared up too. There we go. Nice, smooth, nice and square, all the corners. This is going to be beautiful. It's already cool to touch, even though I just barely turned it off. And since I'm going to be using a low temperature, I don't want this to be loose like that. So I will adjust the wire, tighten it up just a bit. Beautiful sound. Okay, nice and tight. I'm going to check that when I turn it on, it doesn't warp. Okay. Now, we'll go ahead and make some bricks. I'm just going to use the 1 centimeter marks. So I'll start off, move this to the 1 centimeter, touch, touch, touch. Now I'm going to go beyond the edge of the table here. So now I'm just going to move to where I can see that my lines from the previous cuts are right where they need to be. Okay, there we have it. Nice long smooth cuts, and I don't have to use the ballpoint pen because the Proxxon, because of the heat radiating out, has already rounded off all these edges for me. Next step is to move this to approximately half the thickness of any individual brick. Crank up the heat and cut my row of bricks off. crank the heat up very much, so it does cut just a little bit slower. Now, something that's real nice about using a hot wire table is that this whole stack is somewhat melted together. So this right here is half as many as I did by hand in about 30 minutes. And it's taken me about 10 minutes to do this. I can knock out the rest of this billet rather quickly and have enough bricks to do a lot of brickwork. That's a good thing because I have a lot of brickwork that needs to be done today. And of course, you can always texturize before you do the slits or after. It doesn't matter. Now, that doesn't happen very often, but it just did. So you get a chance to see how quick and easy it is to fix the wire on the Proxon. Comes in a spool. And replaces rather quickly. If your finger doesn't bend the wire while you're trying to slide it in. A little bit of resistance. Mess with the lock just a smidge. Tighten the lock. And we're back in business. I've owned one other hot wire table, and its wire was a single piece that if it broke, you had to replace the whole thing. I love the spool idea of this. Makes it very versatile. Okay, now since I want to continue that same cut that I was on, I'm going to put that up, move my rip fence in place, tighten my rip fence down, and now applying a bit of pressure, turn the heat back on. And I continue right back where I was. No issues, no worries, and I didn't lose a row of bricks when I broke the wire on the Proxon. I've only done that maybe a dozen times in the past year. Okay, I'm back again. I have finished up cutting up that entire billet. So we determined that cutting them by hand out of that little bit that I got took me about 10-15 minutes to make 35 10.5 inch strips of bricks. So we're looking at somewhere around 367 inches of bricks. Now, including a couple screw ups where my hand bounced and made me cut a little extra and ruin a couple pieces, I was able to get 10 sets of 14 rows at 9.5 inches. So let's just say 95, 14. Yeah, I got over 1,000 inches of bricks in about 5 minutes using a hot wire table. A lot of this was eyeballing it, but even eyeballing it, I got really good consistency across all of these. It's time to do some brickwork. So today, what I need to brick up, and I'm going to use the bricks that we made by hand. This is a little cardboard train station for a rural outpost or city or town or something that I made mostly out of single corrugated cardboard for my boy and his HO gauge trains. I used some square wood pieces, matchsticks, to make the window frames, and I primed the whole thing in gray after hot gluing it all together. Stairs are made out of expanded polystyrene foam. I had to seal those before spray priming them, otherwise they would have melted. Styrofoam and most spray paints or primers do not mix well. There are people who have given great reviews on how to seal styrofoam so that you can use spray paints and whatnot. I'll eventually get around to consolidating all that information in another video. Simple little train station. I made it so that he can have a couple train tracks going across it for his HO gauge Bachmann train set. But I'm going to finish this building up with bricks up the sides. The platform is going to have bricks around it. So we got a little bit of brickwork to do. And I've got several hundred inches of bricks to do it with. So for this, I'm going to use a small glue gun, low temp, and I will be putting a small stream of glue first down against the bottom, put the bricks down on it. After I got the bricks set the way I want them, I'll do the next row. The next row is going to be offset by half a brick. That's going to get us our staggered brick pattern, such as on this wall right here. This is a piece that I put together in this fashion. A little tiny bit of hot glue between the bricks, and that gives us our spacing. And when we paint it up, it'll look like there is mortar between all of the bricks. It'll look really great. So here we go. I'll demonstrate a couple of these, and I'm going to try out this new 5-foot roll of glue stick and see if it cooperates. I hope it does. Alrighty. So I'll put down a row of glue. I will put down a row of bricks. And this one, I'm going to start it with that staggered past the end. Try to get this as flat and level as I can. Okay. That takes care of that one. And it nicely went halfway past on this brick. So you can either break it off or cut it off, but that's where I'm leaving it. My next set will go around this way and continue on. So now I'm ready for the next set of bricks. I'll take one that's nice and fully formed. I'm going to line it up right there. And again, I'll just be able to break off this one right there. I'm going to put a quick layer of glue. I'm going to lean it towards the front of the first layer of bricks because that first layer is kind of tilting forward a bit too much. I'll get this lined up, get it placed on. You can see that we're going to go ahead and start getting our staggered brick look here. Now, just to kind of make it easier for the next row, I'll put the first row on each side as well. And I'll even do the second row. Second row is going to go across and stagger. I try to keep these as level as possible as I'm putting them down, so that way I end up coming around the corners and meeting up nice and flush and not needing to try to improvise when I come around the corner. All right. And because of the way I did this back platform, I'm not gonna carry around that corner or else I'll ruin those stairs. So I'll call that good right there. And now I'm ready to come around this side. Yeah, and I messed that up a little bit, but it'll do okay. Now that one's going to come nice and clean down at this end. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that one off right there. And I'll continue on with the next brick right here. I'm already seeing an issue with this long roll of glue stick that I don't like. It has to have a free range of motion or else it won't feed. I have to keep getting used to that. Okay. Only a minor issue right here. And I'm sure that I can fix that with half a brick. Okay. I think we're going to turn out real nice here. Okay, we have used approximately 10.5 of our 35 lengths of bricks. The station master, who obviously has control of this railroad station, has informed me that it would be more authentic if only the bottom half of the building were brick and that the top half is wood. Therefore, I'm stopping here, and since wood planks are not part of what I'm trying to cover today, we are going to call this one done as far as bricks are concerned. I was able to kind of piece together, some of them not so pretty, some of them pretty. Did some thinner bricks to get around here. Again, the backside is definitely not pretty, but I do have a nice uniform layer of bricks around. I have some hot glue wisps to clean up throughout. It'll be easier when I get my tweezers. And after I finish cleaning all of that up, I will put a new cap over the top of the platform so that it looks a bit more authentic, and it'll be of boards, and I will paint that up before I bother doing the boards for the top half of this, and that gives me material for another video. So that's more of a modern approach for it, and a kind of timeless approach is a simple building that I've been working on. I'm going to move out here. Okay. This is going to be a late medieval or early industrial age cottage. I've done the bricks all the way around. I cut using small scraps. I got all the peaks. Everything goes all the way around except for where the chimney is. This is extruded polystyrene, which is what I decided to make this building out of. That is just a substrate. Whatever your substrate is does not matter. This is going to be for a role-playing game. I like my role-playing game buildings to be a complete building. I take off the top and leave an interior. So this is very much work in progress, but one difference here compared to the rail station is that I have not left the roof on this one. I've started to learn that finishing the walls is very important before you bother trying to put the roof on, because the roof will make it almost impossible to reach many nooks and crannies while you're trying to texture or design the walls. The roof will come later, as will windows, which will either replace or cover brickwork, door, and anything else on the outside. Finish up the roof, and then I'll paint the whole thing. So I have a few more projects that I get to share on this one. I'll show what the station looks like after it's painted in the next video. Thanks for following along with this bit of brickwork, and I hope that this technique will help you to develop brick and stonework for your model architecture needs.